Welcome back to the Coach Unscripted podcast. I'm your host, Trey Belcher. Unfortunately, Corey couldn't come with us today, so he sends his regards and he will see you next time. But with us today is a giant of the fitness industry, owner of Functional Movement Systems, one of my mentors in the business, Gray Cook. Welcome in, big dog.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
We were talking before we came on about some of the stories from our times together, and everyone that knows about FMS and all the things that you've done to change the way people look at fitness and movement. But you've got the movement podcast with Lee that you guys talk about the mobility and stability motor control. So I want to go a little different route today. And we were talking before. So a couple months ago, your dad is a preacher, and I saw him preach for the first time. And when he was up there, I could hear the Gray Cook coming out of it. I could hear the style. I could hear the approach. I could hear all those things. So I want to start by kind of talking about how your dad and his style and I want to know about his influence on you as the speaker that you are.
Okay. My dad was a businessman in Virginia Beach until I was about 9 or 10 years old, and literally as a second career choice felt called to the ministry. And it was a calling that had a lot of downsides. Big drop in income, moving from Virginia Beach to Dry Fork, Virginia, being considered a freshman pastor, even though he was an accomplished VP in the business world. So he ate not a slice of humble pie. He ate all the slices, but he felt drawn and called to a mission. So my dad was actually given a church before he had gone to seminary. So we moved to this area. My dad completed his BS degree at Averett College while he was preaching at 2 churches, visiting the sick and the elderly and doing all the other duties. And then for 9 summers, he would spend the bulk of his summer at Duke University completing seminary. He'd come home on Wednesday nights and weekends. And I watched my dad go through these very, very difficult religion and philosophy concepts at seminary. But what I saw him do on Sunday was not make these tobacco farmers and rural people in Dry Fork learn the scripture at the level he learned it. He basically broke down the concepts and made them highly relatable, almost like Jesus made his parables relatable to the people of the time he was speaking to. So the message was definitely bigger than the man. He wasn't worried about polish. The very first thing I ever saw him do is take off the robe and hang it over somewhere and roll up his shirt sleeves, indicating, I'm here to work for you guys. I'm not here to pose for you guys. And that impacted me because I knew he knew more depth and breadth of the subject matter than he was communicating to everybody, but he was giving them the pearl. So fast forward, I got from the time I was 10 to the time I left home at 18, I got his communication style. Very complex stuff, but given and handed with love and kindness to people who didn't have his credentials. And I go get a bachelor's degree in sports medicine, minor in athletic training. I go to University of Miami and get a master's degree, and then I come out and specialize in orthopedics and get board certified. But at the same time, I heard a lot of people with my same credentials sort of preaching anatomy and physiology to their patients and clients and athletes. And I'm like, dude, you ain't got to learn back anatomy for me to help you with your back. Just like I don't have to learn to rebuild an engine just because I dropped my car off at the mechanic. So I was trying to make many things as relatable as possible. The other thing I noticed when I began my lecture career is most of the people lecturing on the sports medicine circuit at the time, and I was one of the junior guys, I got pulled onto the sports med circuit, is people would talk about movement, people would talk about rehab, people would talk about exercise techniques, but nobody would bring anybody on stage. And when I started studying manual therapy at a higher level up in Canada, my instructors, somebody had the question, well, how do you manipulate a neck when you got this going on? And he goes, well, does anybody have that problem? I'm like, yeah. And he goes, well, come on up here. And they right on stage. And that's where I started. Can anybody out here not touch your toes? Well, get on up on stage. Nobody had ever seen that stuff before. But my whole point is I do this crap every day. And so how can I make this relatable? I wasn't trying to show people how to fix a toe touch problem. I was trying to think, how many of you guys thought this would change in 3 minutes? Because everybody's ready to argue for a tissue model and fascial lines and, adaptation. And I'm like, no, this guy had a bunch of unnecessary tension. We dumped it off. Now we can truly see the problem, because the toe touch progression doesn't fix everybody, but it fixes the right person at the right time, and you need to know how to do that. Number one, I tried to make the subject matter as relatable as my dad. And number two, if I'm going to talk about movement, I'm going to get movement involved in this thing. So I'm either going to have a sensory rich slide presentation, or I'm going to grab somebody from the audience and do what I do on Thursday, to really try to make the topic tangible and relatable. So I learned that from him. That's nothing that taught me in college. I didn't do well in public speaking in college because I wasn't an expert in the subject matter. The minute you're an expert in the subject matter, you don't try to impress people with the subject matter. You try to inspire them with it.
Yeah. So this is not totally not where I was planning on going with this next question, but so when you have that influence from your dad and learning how to make things relatable. So then you come out of college, you get into your career before you design the movement screen. So how did those influences from your dad, from learning those, being relatable and being able to give people parts, or not necessarily parts, but stories or things to take away, how did those influences get you to that point from coming out of college, learning what you learned in college, the very traditional way, to the point where you drew the movement screen on the napkin? What was that?
Okay. Number one, I never understood what my dad was saying. When I was playing football, when I was running track, every now and then he and I would talk. And the one thing he didn't do is preach at me, but he would, whenever I would have a situation where I maybe wasn't starting in football or something like that, he goes, you going to be a leader or a follower? I didn't know what he meant by that, but slowly but surely, by the time I hit my senior year, I was the captain of the football team, captain of the track team. I got into college. I'm an RA in the dorm. I'm always looking for these opportunities to just go ahead and push myself out of my comfort zone and be a leader. Captain of the football team didn't mean I was the best player on the team, but I did think I had the respect of a lot of players on the team. And so if somebody's getting a little too big for their britches, the coach, we'd work with the coach and do that. But I started realizing that when you put yourself in a leadership role, it doesn't mean you're bossing people around. It means you're really trying to get the herd going in the right direction. And sometimes you do that from the front, and sometimes you do that from behind. And so when I finally found myself, by the way, in physical therapy, you don't make more money for getting your patients better quicker. You don't. Okay. As a matter of fact, you could argue you make more money by dragging out a case longer. The only way you make more money as a young physical therapist is you move up in an administrative role. But when you move up in an administrative role, you literally see less patients. And I had been working on that skill set because after University of Miami, I put myself in with a mentor named Paul Hughes, who really gave me my head to toe approach. So I don't care, Trey, whether you come to me and say, my jaw's clicking and I got TMJ, or my back hurts, or I've got, a bad knee. I'm going head to toe because I owe you that. I don't want to miss anything. And I'll be honest with you, anybody can chase the pain with a needle or an ultrasound head or whatever. And I wanted to be more than that. But I also, if I'm going to be in this clinic, and you can only come back to your hometown once. So I've been away for a long time. My dad had a good name in this town, and this is where I decided I wanted to raise my kids. I had opportunities. There were other places I could go, but I really functioned better in a grounded situation. I've been around the world a few different times and talked about this message, but I come home, stick my feet right back in that red clay, and I'm back where I need to be. Now I find myself as a director of a clinic, not because I know how to manage people, but because arguably I'm the most credentialed therapist here, meaning I want all the problem cases in my room, right? And so as a young leader, I'm not sitting behind a desk telling people how to rehab. I'm saying I want as many patients as I can see in a day in my evaluation room as I can. And if it's a cut and dry knee, I want so-and-so to handle it. And if it's an easy, and so I was making sure that my staff wasn't overwhelmed and I was trying to keep the complex problems. That's the one thing I was trying to do for my staff. And in doing that, they were like, well, how did you know how to do this and how did you know how to do that? So we started doing a lot more functional assessments. Lee tells a story about the first time I ever looked at an ankle patient with him. And I'm like, yeah, I know it's a sprained ankle. What else is going on? But I did that with every one of my staff to the point where we were sort of doing what a good basketball team does. I didn't have to look at who I was going to pass to. I could do that and my dude was ready, or she was, right where she needed to be. And we had that kind of thing, that kind of chemistry going. Nobody had ever seen that. And it accomplished two things. Each of my people were literally not only seeing a few more people a day than average, these people were happy. They're freaking getting better. And so I already had this sort of raise the bar in my own clinic because I realized everybody's showing up thinking they know how to do this, but I don't think any of us know how to do this, but we can figure it out if we hold each other accountable. So the one thing that happens when I fly away and have this problem and I sort of come up with the movement screen, I was just adding a little bit more system and structure to an ethos that I had been cultivating in the clinic, which is we're not going to put problems under the rug. We're going to wear them right on our sleeve until we solve that problem. And when you come up with that movement screen, we went through our growing pains. Nobody paid us to do it. I didn't have a contract with Reebok. I didn't have a research grant. We just showed up in the kitchen of the clinic an hour early one morning a week and met on this. And of my original 7-point movement screen, we retained 5 of the patterns that I had thrown down. We modified 2 of them for reliability. The only thing I was adamant about is let's not make this another conditioning test, which means I'm not caring about volume, sets, or reps. I'm looking at quality. That's the one thing that I feel people aren't measuring with any degree of precision or integrity. That's movement quality. And when people did look at quality, they were looking at a single joint contraction, like on muscle contraction, like on isokinetics. I'm looking at the knee, how quick the quad contracts. They weren't looking at fundamental patterns. Well, you either go sport specific and you come up with a movement screen for baseball and a movement screen for mogul skiing and a movement screen for MMA and a movement screen for the military, or you're like, but all these humans have shoulders, hips, knees, ankles, T-spines, diaphragms, So what are the common things that are barriers to skill acquisition or attaining a level of fitness? And they come down to mobility and stability. And I'm like, we all need to see this the same way, and we need to standardize this. Fast forward to now, I literally think the world would embrace with open arms. Trey, if you could buy a phone booth box and stick it in your gym like a stand-up tanning booth, people could walk in one end and walk out the other, and it would issue a movement screen. That would be the hottest selling thing on the planet. But that phone booth ain't going to fix the movement screen. It's simply going to say what it is. You still need your coaches and your staff to embrace and own the problem and fix it. So my whole point is, if you ain't got time to do a movement screen, but you think you're qualified to fix one, then learn the skill set, because we're always going to have tools and force plates and cameras to help us document and be precise about that. But my whole point of creating a movement screen for my own staff is we got to look at that squat and we got to all see the same thing. And lo and behold, that grew out of our clinic when I'm working with Greg Rose over at the Titleist Performance Institute. Greg had attended a course on the movement screen. So literally in one sentence, I'm like, he's talking to me about a pro golfer. I'm like, what's his squat? He goes, he's got a 1. I'm like, good. And then, so I immediately have a mental picture of how bad this guy's squat is and some of the things. And so Greg and I are actually working on PGA players in the early days of TPI using my little communication tool of movement, because we couldn't send videos back and forth that quick. I mean, we were packing up VHS tapes and shipping them across the country at the time. So what I realized is the movement standard that I tried to set gave me communication and accountability. Number one, if you're not good at screening, then I can't talk to you yet, because we're going to be very frustrated with each other. And once you get good with screening, what's an acceptable close rate? So this is one of the things I think you can appreciate. Keith Fields was my original strength coach working hand in hand with me. And we were down in North Carolina together. And when I came back to Danville, Virginia to be part of Howard Dunn's practice, he said, we're going to have to get some staff in here. And I'm like, I already know who I need. And he goes, do you have a PT or a PT assistant or an athletic trainer you want to recruit? I'm like, no, he's a strength coach. He goes, what do we need a strength coach for in a PT clinic? And I'm like, I tell you what, me and Keith Fields can beat any 3 PTs you got, right? Because he trusts my assessment and manual therapy skills, and he can exercise more people than I can in the same amount of time. He's just got those chops. So when Keith and I are developing our relationship around function, we were working with a female ACL who was in her last 2 weeks of rehab. I'd finished all the soft tissue, patella was moving good, hip was mobile, ankle was great. Still really crappy on a lunge. And I didn't standardize the inline lunge. It was obvious. She couldn't lunge well on one side. She lunged pretty good on the other side. I walked out to Keith and I'm like, listen, man, her next 2 weeks here, she's your patient. You got 6 visits with her. You can give her any homework you want. Here's what I need. I need to walk up and not be able to tell which is her bad lunge anymore. And he goes, okay, so what do you want me to do? And I'm like, you didn't hear me. Fix her friggin' lunge. It ain't a mobility or stability problem that I need her on the table for. This is her learning the pattern of a lunge, right? And I'm not saying puff up her quad or make her hamstring stronger. I'm like, I shouldn't be able to tell which is her bad knee from the way she lunges in 2 weeks. And he goes, well, what do you want me to do? And I'm like, well, I guess you could just rep out 1,000 lunges and hope it gets better, but any strength coach on the planet can do that. Impress me. And he goes, well, where do we start? And I'm like, what looks bad? The top of her lunge or the bottom of her lunge? The deeper she gets, the worse it looks. I'm like, then why wouldn't you put her in half kneeling and do some pushes and pulls and chops and lifts and have her establish this nice static base, because she's lunging to a depth of half kneeling. And if she gets worse and worse as she gets to that position, let's get her a lot of comfort in that position, a lot of confidence in that position. Outside of that, don't bother me anymore. I got low back pain in room 3. I got a guy who just broke his neck in room 4. Fix the friggin' lunge. And I allowed him to go through those growing pains, but I did set a mark for him to shoot for. And he's freaking good. The guy was an accomplished power lifter, had a master's degree in exercise science. But at the time, if you had a bad movement pattern, we just made you do that pattern. We practiced the freaking test, right? And I'm like, that's really not the way we unpack this. If I got a kid that can't read, we don't just keep feeding them books. We break down the word and sentence structure until they can flow that back into what I would consider normal pace reading. So break down the lunge, feed it back to her. You got 2 weeks. That became all of our movement progression. So even before we had a movement screen standard, we were coming at movement saying, just because the lunge is bad doesn't mean we need more lunges on the left. We need to know why the lunges on the left are bad. And we may break that down and isolate that quad, but never assume because that quad is equal, the lunges are equal, right? But if the quads aren't equal, that's a good reason for not having them. But there's a lot of people who still have movement asymmetry that are equally strong on the left and right side. So Keith came back with me, and literally me and him, people were watching Keith and I close cases from a good assessment and a little bit of manual therapy and some good functional exercise practices. And Keith and I wrote a couple of articles for NSCA on functional training for the torso. And we used the word torso because nobody was using the word core at the time. That's how long ago that was. But Keith was my counterpart in the strength conditioning floor. And we had this, what is now very modern. You go into any high-end PT clinic and they've got PT right here. And there's a gym right there. There's turf. There's the exact same equipment you'd have in a CrossFit or a fitness gym, but we're using it in innovative ways to rehab. And then we're doing post-rehab and wellness and fitness on top of that. But that level of communication and accountability is, there's a bad movement pattern. We can all see it the same way. We may fix it differently, but if it takes you more than 2 weeks, then you're going to have to accept direction because that's inefficient. Instead of everybody getting butthurt and personally intimidated by that, we just stepped up and said, yeah, It's an 8-mile march. 7 ain't good enough. So.
Yeah, and it's knowing the system and having worked with you, like, and you've said it. If you said it once, you've said it 1,000 times. We'll teach you the system, but we're not going to hold your hand and help you fix things. You've got to be able to interpret the system and to learn the system and to figure out how things work. And so, hearing you tell stories about Keith going through that same pilgrimage to figuring out how to learn the system and how to work the system, I can appreciate those things, because those influences are how I run things now. And it's you have to think and you have to figure it out, and you have to be able to adjust and pivot and evolve the system, because if it's all paint by numbers, when you get that one that's not paint by numbers, you got nowhere to go.
That's right. That's right. And people hit a stall. But that's the difference in a chef and a line cook. And you and I have talked about the book I wrote, The Business of Movement, which really is not here to teach you how to movement screen or anything like that. There you go, shameless plug. But literally, it was my own journey saying, you get to a point in your career, and we all do, when you do what every parent is guilty of doing. Do as I say, not as I do. But when you hear yourself on stage dispensing advice, you could probably be taking your own advice better. You come to, you either got to hide that shit like some politicians do and hope nobody ever finds out, or just friggin' own it. And so many people have asked me to mentor them on how do we build a team. And I'm like, well, the way we did it is we all screened each other, knowing very well there weren't going to be any perfect movement screen scores in the room. Let's hold each other accountable. Let's go through the growing pains that we're getting ready to make our athletes and our clients and our patients do. Basically, a chef tastes the food. They're not scared to eat what they just made. Line cooks don't have to, because it's the same burger and the same grill and the same bun every day, and it's get it on through. And there are two kinds of rehabilitation models right now. The conveyor belt that only needs a PT with a license number to sign here and say that we dispensed the therapy, whether it worked or not, or those people who roll up their sleeves. And the system is here to serve the patient and to keep you accountable for all the different things. But that doesn't mean the system doesn't allow you to have unique ways to treat each patient. I have patients right now that are scared to death of dry needling. Well, dry needling isn't physical therapy. It's a tactic within physical therapy. But I was fixing necks and backs at the highest level of Olympics and pro sports and in my own community before I started dry needling, before I had a class 4 laser, before, all that. And literally once you find the movement problem, you just figure out ways to see if the body will budge or not. And you just keep going upstream. So the system was such a great mentor for us, because I said, listen, if I set up somebody's rehab program and you do everything like I said, and they're not there in 2 weeks, I own that. I called it wrong. And I had a guy in a week and a half ago who came over from Wales. He works with a lot of cricket athletes. And the one thing we were talking about in any swinging or throwing sport is dumping tension. So I said, let me go through a drill with you. And we had these BB guns with silver BBs. And I'm throwing up these water bottles that are spray painted black, and they got one piece of white tape around them. And I'm throwing these bottles up and I'm hitting them, right? And I said, now I want you to try it. He goes, there's no way I can do that. I'm like, I don't need you to hit the bottle. I need you to call your miss. So it's a silver BB. It's in sunlight. And I throw the bottle up. And obviously he doesn't hit it. And I'm like, yeah, but where did you miss? He goes, low. I'm like, good. Call it every time. Low, left, right, over, under. And then all of a sudden, boom, he hits. And I'm like, good. That's the only one you don't have to call. Now call your misses. I'm not trying to humiliate him, but I've worked with a lot of young pitchers and quarterbacks that get performance anxiety, right? They get what we call, you get scared at the target, right? And so I'm like, dump it off. Every one of these is a rep unto itself, but call your miss. And I don't want you to adjust, but let your brain hear you own the fact that you didn't hit your target. And I think we had these 5-gallon buckets of water bottles that I'd spray painted. By the time we got to the third bucket, he was 50% hitting a moving target with a BB gun with absolutely no background. This guy had a background in pistols, not in rifles. But my point was, calling your misses is only humiliating if you think it is. But if it's the quickest way to get you hitting the damn bottles, then call your misses. I'm not trying to humble you. I'm trying to get you to use a feedback loop. And if you read the books, The Talent Code or Talent is Overrated, that's called deliberate practice. Most pro golfers don't hit a bucket of balls. They hit a bucket of balls to an area of grass that's about the size of a hula hoop. And if they're not in the hula hoop, they don't consider it a hit. Whereas you go out to a driving range, they're just whacking golf balls. They don't care where they go. They wait till one hits good and then they think they're good. And I'm like, no, call your misses. And so we got to do that when you program an athlete and their vertical leap isn't where it needs to be, or when I try to rehab somebody and their balance isn't where it needs to be, we got to call our misses. But here's the thing. I'm not just waiting 2 weeks to reevaluate you. I'm setting up these feedback loops in every session so I know if you're on a linear trajectory to where I promised you I'd try to get you.
You know, you talk about calling your misses and not necessarily misses, but always taking inventory of where things are and how to improve them. And over the years, the movement screen, you've made some adjustments to the movement screen, to the rotary stability. And without necessarily going into specifics, when we had Lee on a few weeks ago, he was talking about potential possible changes to the shoulder clearing test.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you look at the screen or when you look at the metrics and the analytics, all the data that you've collected, what goes into saying we could do this better? And even owning that it could be better and always trying to refine these things. And having been around you enough, your brain turns, I don't know if it turns faster than anybody else's, but it's always turning and you're always looking at these things. You're always analyzing these things. So kind of how do you look at those things to say this could be better, or we need to change this, or we need to go this direction? Kind of what's your mindset on those things?
Okay. The biggest barrier to people doing movement screens right now is the fact that you need a kit and the fact that it's going to take you, in many cases, more than 10 minutes. The third thing is it's not necessarily appropriate for a general wellness or fitness client. I don't need to see their push-up or lunge to know where to start. A lot of people have used that as a reason not to do anything. So in the original infancy of this thing, I can tell you this. I wanted to look at movement patterns that were integral to growth and development, that allowed you to almost put yourself in a submission hold. So an inline lunge literally puts your right lat and your left IT band in a tug of war. The overhead deep squat puts your upper body and your lower body in a tug of war. A planked out push-up encourages you to sag your back. So I'm not trying to make tests that people can pass. I'm trying to create a squeeze point. So now that we've done the movement screen by the book with an obstacle like the kit, I can tell you if you're trying to get somebody quickly screened, we can do it without a kit, but I'm going to need you to control foot position in a very narrow base because nobody is going to fall to get a movement pattern. They're always going to short a movement pattern to save their balance. So I can still capture quite a bit of movement that we could be working on. And many times, Trey, if I'm movement screening you and you flunk your leg raise, I already know I'm working on that. The rest of the screen is a formality to say, damn, you had a bad lunge, bad shoulder mobility, and a poor hurdle step on one side, but we fixed your leg raise and 80% of that got better. I wouldn't have been able to say that had I not done a full screen, but I don't expect somebody who's only got 5 minutes with a client to do that. That was my burden to prove. Here's what we've got now. After 20 years of movement screening, don't have pain with normal movements. Push, pull, bend, twist, whatever, hinge. Don't have significant asymmetries with movement patterns. Don't have balance problems, eyes open or eyes closed. Okay. And if we're talking in FMS, don't have too many ones if you're going to be an athlete. That's what we know. Now that FMS and the Y balance test have populated these risk factors, because prior to movement screening, the two major risk factors that would help you predict maybe a higher risk for future injury were pain with movement and past medical history or a previous injury. Now we know how shitty your balance can be and you still not have too much risk, how your movement patterns can be and not have too much risk, and it lines right back up with twos on everything, no asymmetries. However, if I'm looking at a 60-year-old weight loss client that's predominantly not going to lift a lot of weight and mostly interested in walking. I can do a movement screen without a kit in less than 4 minutes. It'll look very much like the top tier of the SFMA, but since we're not going to break it out, we still need to score it. And I still need you to scrub those risk factors. So we're not going to get aggressive on a walking program as long as we got a balance issue. But what if that balance issue can actually get a little bit better in 10 minutes? Then your warm up is not directed at a physiological, metabolic, tissue warming circulation effect. I aim it right at a symmetry flow, or some of the stuff you and I've worked on together, to calibrate you before conditioning. And I think that's lost when I work with teams. The whole thing I did with the NFL team I worked with this past summer is I said, we don't have time to do a lot of correctives. Okay, good. Then make your warm up target the state of readiness, because everybody can have a little bit better mobility, symmetry, and balance if you organize the warm up right. Outside of that, why are we doing a warm up, right? If I can change your state of readiness in 10 minutes, then I also improve your adaptive capacity and motor learning over the session. So whether we're training with Trey or practicing in the batting cage or rehabbing with Gray, it doesn't matter. If I can calibrate you prior to the thing, then my investment is better held. There's less cracks in the vessel. It holds more of what we did. So many people get stuck on either do a full screen or not do it at all and do these correctives this way. I'm like, no, find out the weak link in movement and see if it's a conditioning problem and it's going to change slow over 4 to 6 weeks, or see if it's a calibration problem and it can be upgraded a day. You come in, your toe touch looks like crap. We do something, it's better. We're going to be working with a better toe touch for at least 35 minutes in your workout. I have no illusions that tomorrow you're going to come in with a rectified or fully functional toe touch, but we know how to get it there in 5 to 8 minutes, right? So that's my thing. So many people give themselves excuses for not doing a screen or not doing correctives because of a time or space or efficiency issue. And I'm like, it's not about the movement screen or correctives. It's about capturing a risk factor that's only going to hurt your outcomes as a coach or my outcomes as a therapist. And if I can manage those in a cohesive way with a little bit of understanding, then we've generated a better warm-up. So part of what I'm doing is redesigning the warm-up stations based on your movement profile and your current state of readiness, because risk is potentially how things are going in the future. Readiness means, could you be any better in 10 minutes than you are right now? And if the answer is yes, then what's that 10 minutes look like? And why aren't coaches begging for it? Why are we still just walking around doing grass pickers and shit like that when I can't prove it makes a difference in the state of readiness for my players? And that's why I've been a big proponent. I know Indian clubs look awkward, but if I'm trying to dump tension in the upper carriage for somebody trying to get better bat speed, that's a 10-minute investment that I can prove on Force Play Tour with a camera. You're better off doing that before you do that.
Yeah, and as you've gone through the years, and we, when I say we, I always tell this joke, when we did the movement flows, I was just fortunate enough to be in the room. I can say Gray came up with the movement flows, and I just I got to be his dummy practicing all these things out down in your office, and and now transitioning into those risk factors and the the behavioral assessments and the sleep scores and all those things. How much, as you've evolved into more of those more holistic additional risk factors, how did you blend all those things together in with the self screens and all those things?
Kyle Kiesel told me this a long time ago when I was mentoring him, because you know Courtney Herndon. I think you met probably Kyle before, but those are two therapists where I used to walk in the exam room after they did an evaluation and find things they missed, but I'd never vocalize that in front of the patient. We'd always walk out, close the door. I'm like, all right, you missed this, this, and this. That was calling your misses. I wasn't trying. That's the way I was trained. I was trained by a guy who didn't have time to stroke my ego. He goes, here's what you missed today. And then tomorrow, here's what you missed. Hey, you didn't miss that much. I mean, that was the evolution of that. Right. But I used to walk in a room, and as I was doing my SFMA, I would discuss with some of my back or neck patients, how you sleeping? Because my first order of business is not to fix your left rotation. Is to get you enough deep sleep so you can detox your tissue. and actually recycle so I can do it. Because no matter how good a therapy I do today, if you have a shitty night's sleep, what do you look like tomorrow? You look like shit. And that reflects back on me. So if I don't capture hydration, sleep, high inflammatory foods, inappropriate activity levels, she's running too much, he ain't doing nothing. Okay. So adjusting activity levels, owning your past medical history and some of the limitations that might be here right now. Right. So I realize the only thing that's influencing movement isn't movement. Your stress recovery cycle is influencing movement too. So I don't have to become a sleep specialist or a nutrition specialist or a breathing expert to realize you're shallow breathing, you have a high inflammatory diet, and you're sleeping like crap. I can't beat that. There's no Gray Cook flow or corrective on the planet that will make you move good in that toxic environment. So I've always embraced that. But now we've got wearables and we've got this Simio app, which I'm excited about because it is a survey and a screen on the same day. Now, somebody like yourself, the only thing you need from Simio is the first day report card, because you're going to be the coach. You're going to be the advisor. So you don't need a bot doing that in the background. But that one audit right up front, that one, I'm your accountant, let me see your books. Okay, here's what you're doing wrong. But we don't need to do an audit tomorrow. We can take that audit and go ahead and say, okay, what's the weakest link here and what am I aiming at? So a lot of times, Trey, I'll actually get somebody to do their movement stuff before bed. That's an inappropriate time to exercise in a fitness person's mind. But if I can dump some trap tension and do all this other stuff prior to bed, and you actually sleep a little bit longer, then we're on the path to that. So I didn't just want the people who are following our work to be movement geeks trying to fix movement problems in a toxic environment. At some point, we've got to establish, I'm not a sleep expert, but I know what's good enough. You could argue that I'm not a lunge expert, but I know what's good enough. I'm not a breathing expert, but I know what's good enough. So when I find a breathing problem, I don't just assign breathing exercises. I really make breathing a big part of your balance work or your toe touch progression. And what we've been able to see is the stuff on the survey is self-care and lifestyle, and most people are focusing on the wrong thing. Alarm here, sorry about that. Most people are focusing on the wrong thing. And so having that survey of self-care and recovery, activity level and movement quality in the same day allows me to basically bring people to a crossroads. Philosophically speaking, I'm going right back to my dad. I'm going to ask everybody in the church a question today. Are you overstressed or under-recovered? And you can't say both. So when in doubt, let's assume you're under-recovered and let's do everything we can to get you to recover better and levy homeostasis. And from that, let's inject stress and see how you bounce back. But I think a lot of times the enthusiastic therapist, chiropractor, strength coach enters the situation, I'm going to stress you out and you're going to bounce back bigger, faster, stronger tomorrow. Not if you're in a toxic environment, you're not. You're just going to break down. So all of these risk factors that we have been accumulating about bad movement, bad balance, mobility, and stability are actually risk factors, not just for sports and athletics, but they're risk factors for exercise, right? They're risk factors for your spin class. They're risk factors for your walking club. Because if everybody in your walking club is rucking and pushing the envelope and you got bad balance on left, you're going to hit a wall and you're going to think it's you. It's not. You just don't have good balance. And if we'd fixed that ahead of time, you'd be walking and rucking with your club and not falling behind. But so many people start to fall behind and then they get sold the hack, right? Well, I need to have orthotics. That's what the problem is. Or I need to be drinking twice as much green tea, or I need a cooling mattress or something like that. Everybody likes to make it about one thing. And that's what I love about Simio. It's going to do across the board audit. Are you in a toxic environment? Do you have toxic movement? And where do we start? And I always start with breathing, sleep, hydration, and then pull the inflammatory food. I don't tell you how to eat, but I'll tell you what not to eat. And that usually gets me over the hump so the system can actually start responding to the movement lessons that I'm trying to teach the brain and body.
So it basically is it is the Gray Cook philosophy is I'm going to put you up against the bottleneck and then you're going to have to reckon with that.
Yeah, yeah. And when I've got a patient, arguing with me for 4 Dr. Peppers a day, I'm like, we don't need to work together. I got plenty of people that'll listen to me, so I'm easily willing to fire a patient. But the funny thing is, I'm not trying to have this adversarial thing. I'm like, if you want to be a man, you can't eat like a 13-year-old girl. You got a problem with that? You know, Now, I wouldn't say that to a 13-year-old girl. I'd say that to a 40-year-old man who's asking me, should he be going on testosterone? And I'm like, no, I think you need to make your own. I think you need to clean up your sleep, clean up your diet, clean up your hydration, and clean up the way you exercise before you ever resort to that. Just like how many people are going to take a shot to lose weight instead of grow up and clean up their lifestyle a little bit, because pharmaceutical companies will always be there to cover up the problem for you. They're never going to solve the problem. 97% of medications on the market are to manage symptoms, not create cures. Just know that. And they're also set up to create long-term dependence, not short-term solutions. So as long as you know that going into your next pharmaceutical, that it's here to cover symptoms and allow you to suffer comfortably, not to cure the situation, then you got to be an educated consumer there. And I know that's going to piss a lot of people off, because a lot of us have clients that are making those choices. And I'm not saying I'm not going to work with you, but you need to be informed, because, if somebody's trying to drink a 6-pack of beer every night and lose weight, I'm going to have to talk to them about that. But anytime you're cheating the system and not listening to all these stress and recovery indicators and just covering them up, the outcome's going to be crappy. There was a back surgeon in Miami who was part of our back program when I was going through PT school. He would not do back surgery on anybody who was a smoker. But if they would quit smoking prior to back surgery and through rehab, he wasn't going to tell you what to do after that. But his rationale to the patient was, your circulation is compromised, your vasoconstriction is not really going to heal the surgical site. And then he pulled me aside and he goes, if they're not tough enough to quit smoking, they're not tough enough to go through back surgery and the rehab to get back. So I literally am hedging my bet. The people who are tough enough to easily break a habit you should try to break are going to be fine. And the ones who got to hug that thing like a teddy bear, they got to hug that high sugar diet or the extra alcohol or nicotine they think they need, you're not going to be successful with them anyway, because I hate to say it, they got a bigger problem than a back problem. They got a toxic environment, and backs are supposed to be bad in toxic environments.
Yeah. Well, and with all those things, that forces the person to own their misses. With everything that you've described there, whether it's Semio and all the screens that you go through, if people have bad sleep, they know they have bad sleep. If you really force them to answer truthfully, they know they have bad
Trey,
sleep.
I had horrible sleep for a long time, and I just survived with it. I used to just use a lot of caffeine to cover it up. I went probably 3 years into a neck problem when I should have just got the surgery. My surgery was way more complicated. So I'm not preaching from a high mountaintop. I have made every mistake I get on people about, but I wear an Oura ring now, and my weakest link is sleep. I have no problem getting my step count. I have no problem with hydration. My breathing's great, but I'm a sleeper. And it goes all the way back to my childhood, but there are things I can do. And now at 2 p.m., when I'm getting a little groggy, I realize that means I need a nap, not a quad espresso. But for the longest time, I used to do the quad espresso, power through, but over time, adrenal fatigue, bad sleep, and all these things start accumulating. So, I'm not perfect, but I'd like to think that if I can recognize my misses quicker, that I can help other people do that with grace and forgiveness. So I'm not saying I can't work with you. I'm saying you got to be crazy. Once again, you got credit card debt, and you're asking me about an investment opportunity? Reconcile your debt first. Every expert will tell you that, except the one trying to sell you the stock.
Yeah, the sooner you own your misses, the less you have to pay as you go. But you're going to have to pay up at some point, and the longer you don't own your miss, the bigger the price, or the bigger the check you got to write at the end. But that's the thing, and I just wrote a little note. Everything from your Welsh guy shooting at the bottle, having to call his misses, to the movement screen, to Simeo, to all these things. It all boils down to owning your misses and knowing really where you fall short. Because I'm the same way. Sleep is my bugaboo, and it's just, and I know that, and I've got to own that. And if I want to do something about it, it's all on me to do something about it. And I can take all the screens in the world, but if I already know that, at some point I've got to have the reckoning with that.
You know what? I'll give you the simple down and dirty. It's not that hard. I've got a good mattress, a good pillow. I'm a chronic snorer. I've had my septum worked on twice, and I've had 3 broken noses. Even though my septum's clean, I still wear a nose strip at night, but I still snore a little bit unless I take some of that facial tape and tape my lips together. So, I look like a little bit like Rocky Balboa going to bed, but I try to get to sleep before 10 o'clock. I try to not watch a lot of TV right before. I try not to eat a heavy meal. I really don't drink that much anymore. And believe it or not, my heart rate variability is pretty good for somebody my age with all the baggage I got. And even with a moderate night's sleep, I still have good HRV. Now, my wife is completely opposite. She's got to sleep almost perfect to get good HRV. So her HRV might have more to do with her hydration and some of the stuff she's doing during the day. But if I can get my minimum sleep, my HRV is really good. And so I use those feedback loops I originally got from my Garmin watch and my Oura ring to really sort of coach me up. And it's what I do before bed that helps me sleep better or sleep worse. And so, they're goofy little things, but if they're working, then I'm not missing them.
Yeah. And they're not goofy if they work. It may look goofy from the outside. If that's what's getting the job done, then you've owned your miss.
Well, I've always said the person I bring up on stage and fix their toe touch, that's the one person I ain't got to explain it to. I got to explain it to all 300 people watching, but the one who just dumped that tension and touched their toes realizes for the first time in their life, I'm not built this way. This is accessible. So that's the one person I don't have to explain it to. So anytime I get somebody in the clinic or in the gym and I can find a wonky movement pattern or a movement pattern that could be cleaned up, we do a little test run to see how plastic they are. And I'm willing to accept a small marginal improvement or a miraculous improvement. Miraculous improvements, like you helped me with the video, that's mostly a tone problem. I'm looking for insults in your day and night that are setting you up for high tone. When I see a slow improvement, that's a tissue problem. I'm going to be patient. There's going to be some adaptation, maybe some soft tissue work. Give it time. So you're going to give me a signal in the first or second session of how plastic you are. And I'm going to literally do the same things, but I'm way more patient with people who are slow responders because let's be honest, they probably got way more wrong in their lifestyle than the person who's just got their running volume wrong and they're jacking up their back. If they would just peel it back a little bit, they'd be fine.
Yeah. Well, I can't thank you enough for coming on. I don't want to take up all day long, even though I could sit here probably another 3 hours listening. So we talked a little bit. I know you're speaking at all 3 of the Perform Better Summits. So, and give us a plug for your talks at the summits.
Lee and Chris Poirier both challenged me to talk about low back pain. And it's a topic that I've literally avoided most of my career because I never know who I'm speaking to. If I'm at the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons, I'm going to spin it different than if I'm speaking to strength coaches. But I literally challenge myself, even though I don't want to open Pandora's box, I'm going to come at low back pain like a syndrome, not a diagnosis, because everybody wants to talk about the disc and the facet joint, the psoas and the exercise. And I'm like, listen, man, it is a multifactorial thing. And I could easily give you the mobility and stability recipe, but if you're not listening to the other stuff, it's not going to work. So if you're managing clients with low back pain, you are going to have to talk to them about self-care and movement quality. And you're going to have to basically nurture those things into a direction long before sets and reps and strengthening and conditioning is going to be a thing. Their body won't adapt in a positive way to training if you don't level up that system first.
I encourage all of you to go out and find any YouTube or Instagram post from Gray or Lee or any of the other functional movement systems guys talking, because they've been so instrumental in my career. I wouldn't be where I am without these guys both personally and from all the things that they have taught me. And I'll tell a quick story. When I talked to Lee about this, the first time we ever went out to lunch, the three of us, and we were walking back to the office, and I told you, I said, look, from here on forever, I will always appreciate your system, and I will do the system the right way. And I just want you to know that. And you said, and I'll never forget this. You said, well, Trey, I appreciate you saying that, but if I didn't already believe that, we wouldn't be standing here. So
Yeah. I'm a pattern guy. I already picked it up. But no, you delivered. I remember getting a call from Virginia Tech. It wasn't in a situation where I could get up there and screen some players. You basically answered the call, you delivered the ball, you made good things. And then we did that a few more times. So, when I trust you with the brand, when I'm not there, and you delivered every time. So when somebody's ready to carry the ball. You just do.
Oh, well, look, I appreciate it. And for, if I've heard this once, I've heard this one 1,000 times from you. When the student is ready, the teacher will appear. So, I encourage everybody, go out, listen to the Movement podcast, wherever you can get your podcast with Lee and Gray. Is always great stuff. And they have great guests, and they can tell you far more about mobility, stability, and motor control than I ever could. And so that's why I get to come in here and tell these stories and have a good time with Gray and with Lee and all these guys. So follow Functional Movement on Instagram at Functional Movement. Go find them on YouTube. Just type in Gray Cook, and there'll be enough stuff to keep you busy for hours and hours and hours.
Two other things.
Yeah.
We're switching a lot of what we're doing at FMS to an academy. So it's one-stop shopping. You literally get in the academy. You can take any course we've got, and you can stay in touch with those courses. And we did it so literally, if you were going to pay for 3 FMS courses, you're way cheaper just to join the academy and take the courses at your convenience whenever you want. And number 2, we had 3 cameras going when I did that Call Your Misses thing with James Breeze. And I think he's going to produce a video out of that. So as soon as we get that, you'll get the editor's cut. We'll show you what we're playing with.
Perfect. Look, you are welcome to come back here anytime. I will gladly have you on. And I know Corey hates that he missed it. So we got to have a round 2 with Gray Cook with all 3 of us. And so to wrap this bad boy up, we thank you for joining us on the Coaches Unscripted podcast. We hope today's stories have inspired and empowered you in your coaching journey. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with fellow coaches. Connect with us on Instagram at Coaches Unscripted podcast to continue the conversation and stay updated on future episodes. Until next time, for the great Gray Cook, I'm Trey Belcher. Keep coaching from the heart and building strong communities.
Thank you, brother.
I appreciate you, dude.
Yeah, man.